So once again, the curtain has been pulled back on the facade that is the cohesion of BRICS, as artillery shells made in India have found their way to Ukraine, courtesy of European buyers, while New Delhi sits on its hands despite Russia protesting. According to 11 government and defense industry officials across India and Europe, along with a Reuters analysis of customs data, this backdoor arms transfer has been going on for well over a year, and India hasn't stepped in to stop it, even as Moscow has raised the alarm a couple of times. Now, here's how it's supposed to work. Indian arms export regulations actually clearly state that weapons are meant for the declared buyer. Period. Unauthorized transfers, well, that's supposed to lead to canceled sales. But as the sources and the data show, some European nations have been funneling Indian-made shells to Ukraine anyway, and they're being used against Russian forces. And while the Kremlin has raised this issue at least twice with India, once in July when Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov confronted his Indian counterpart, India hasn't done anything other than just kind of nod politely. Now, Reuters has put these details in the spotlight for the first time, and the latest response from India is flat-out denial. According to India's foreign ministry, the report is, quote, speculative and misleading. Ministry spokesperson Randir Jaiswal insists that the suggestion that India has violated its own regulations is inaccurate and mischievous, as India's defense exports are supposedly governed by strict legal frameworks that includes robust checks and balances on who's buying what, except for when they don't feel like enforcing those rules. Now, Russia is India's longtime arms supplier, accounting for over 60% of its weapons imports, and they have recently gotten quiet on this issue. There's been no official response from Moscow or New Delhi other than internal discussion. In fact, back in January, Jaiswal was quite clear. India had not sold or sent artillery shells to Ukraine. Yet when asked if Indian-made munitions are being used by Ukraine against Russia, sources from both the Indian government and the defense industry admitted that yes, Indian ammunition is in Ukrainian hands, though they downplayed it, saying that it is less than 1% of Ukraine's total weapons imports. So who's behind this quiet, really not so quiet operation? Well, Italy and the Czech Republic. Both are sending Indian ammunition to Ukraine. According to a Spanish official and a former top executive at Yanta India, a state-owned company making some of these shells, this backdoor supply chain is alive and well, and India knows it exists. Ukraine, meanwhile, is running desperately low on artillery ammunition, and European contractors have stepped in to help. Take Italy's MES, for instance. They've been buying empty shells from India, loading them with explosives, and shipping them off to Ukraine. Customs data shows that between February of 2022 and July of 2024, India shipped $35 million worth of shells to MES. It doesn't take Sherlock Holmes to figure out where those shells are ending up. This isn't just a one-off either. The UK-based company Dints Hill, whose board includes an MES executive, shipped over $6.7 million worth of ammunition from Italy to Ukraine earlier this year. Among the goods, Indian-made 155mm shells. But of course, Dints Hill and MES are staying tight-lipped, and why would they talk about this? It's a good way to get Ukraine ammunition. But let's not ignore the geopolitical theater here. India has been walking a tightrope between East and West for years. On one hand, it's deepening its defense and diplomatic ties with Washington while distancing from Russia in that regard. On the other, they do still rely on Russia for a significant portion of its arms imports because of the past sales that they've had, and they don't want to lose that axis. So Prime Minister Modi has refused to join Western sanctions against Moscow, but that doesn't mean India hasn't been quietly hedging its bets. As one Indian defense expert put it, the war in Europe has given Delhi the perfect opportunity to grow its arms export business, and fast. For India, this is about more than just ammunition. From 2018 to 2023, it had exported $3 billion in arms. In the last fiscal year alone, that number hit $2.5 billion. That's a huge increase. 5 years to get to $3 billion and only 1 year to get to the next 2.5. Indian Defense Minister Singh has set his sights on boosting that to $6 billion by 2029, and he knows that Russia isn't going to be providing that money. If you're wondering how India's arms exports shot up by that much since the war in Ukraine began, well, now you have your answer. They're funneling their weapons through European buyers, and it ends up on the battlefield in Ukraine. And while some in the BRICS world might be disappointed in India's decisions here, those in New Delhi would just call it business. So obviously Russia isn't happy Ukraine is getting what it needs and India is cashing in on it. They really have no moral high ground here. Russia may complain, but it doesn't hold much leverage. India, it seems, is playing both sides and doing a decent job of it. But once again, we can see just how tight-knit and strong this group of BRICS nations really is.